Margot Freitag, thank you so much for joining us on the Plant Trainers podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me.
We'd love to know if you have a moment of gratitude to share.
Yes, this is hard because there are many things I'm grateful for. So this morning I was out walking on my property, and the very first thing that I was grateful for were the colors, the autumn colors. But I also have to say I'm very grateful for my family, and I'm also grateful for my journey. The reason that I do what I do today is because of all of the struggles that I went through in the past, and I'm actually now grateful for all of it.
That's the perfect trifecta. Something that catches your eye, our families, and just everybody's on a journey, and whether we're on the upside of our journey or the downside of our journey, it's going to get us to the right place. So if we could just be grateful every day for that, then we know that we're headed in the right direction.
Yeah, very much. Yes.
I love that you just started off with saying you're grateful for your journey, because now all of our listeners want to know what that's all about. So how did you get into what you're doing now, find the plant-based lifestyle? Everybody wants to know.
Yeah. So my journey started way back when I was about 4, when I had my first asthma attack. And my parents rushed me to the emergency room, and they gave me a shot of norepinephrine. All of the doctors in the Montreal General at the time were smoking in the doctors' quarters. It was a whole different era. There were no Ventolin inhalers back then. And so I grew up with asthma and allergies. And, I was told that this was just the way it was. And some doctors said I might get better. But I didn't. I just got worse. And by the time I was in high school, I was going through a Ventolin inhaler every 2 weeks, sometimes more than that. And of course, the steroids, inhaled steroids, prednisone, you name it, I was on it. So I was addicted to Otrivin, which is a nasal spray. I was getting allergy shots as a kid, and I was sick. I was just a sick kid, and then sick teenager, and being sick was a part of who I was, really. And when I was studying to become a massage therapist out west in my 20s, I was so blessed to stumble upon my nutrition program, the nutrition part of the course, which was taught by Brenda Davis. And so Brenda was the first person who really showed me, and my classmates obviously, what a plant-based diet could do. And it was the first time I heard somebody talk about food in a different way. It wasn't like the Canada Food Guide or the USDA guidelines. It was like some things that you eat heal you, and some things that you eat make you sick. So that's where it all started.
So we love that story, especially because Brenda's part of it. I'm just looking up now what episode Brenda was on the Plant Trainers podcast. She is a wealth of information, and good on your program for actually including plant-based nutrition into it, because that's not something that you hear about all too often. But we did get the privilege of interviewing her for episode 210 of the Plant Trainers podcast. And she's a wealth of information for sure.
Amazing. And I got to have her for a full semester. And the story goes that we did have a different nutrition teacher who couldn't make it, somehow canceled at the last minute. And through a friend of a friend, Brenda was the alternate. So I don't know if they were intentionally choosing somebody that was plant-based, but they got her. And it was, a defining moment in my life for sure.
So how long did it take you to adopt a fully plant-based lifestyle?
So obviously the class made a real impact on me. It was, there were lessons there that stayed with me. That was 1996, 1995. I wasn't ready to jump in and give up cheese at that time. It wasn't even on my radar. And I continued to struggle with my health for I would say several years after that. And the defining, or the time that really I knew we had to make a change, was when my little boy, who was 4 at the time, was diagnosed with asthma. And so I knew what we needed to do. And sometimes you need a little push. We did it cold turkey. We gave up dairy. We were not really big meat eaters. anyway, but we did everything we needed to do right then and there. And within 3 days, the Ventolin inhalers were at the back of the cupboard collecting dust.
So yours and his?
Both, yeah.
Both. So, I mean, we've talked about the effects of dairy on our health so many times on the podcast. For those people who haven't heard that, can you talk to us a little bit about how dairy really does play into breathing diseases?
Well, we know obviously that it's addictive, so too much of anything is not good. It's an inflammatory food in its own right. I mean, it doesn't necessarily have a lot of arachidonic acid in it, like meats and other things that cause inflammation, but it's a mucus producer for sure, and definitely, I mean, it causes inflammation. So it was a big factor for us. In fact, I was never a milk drinker, but it was the cheese more than anything. Now, what's really interesting is my son is a hockey player, and he's 17 now, and he will go out for pizzas with his hockey teams. Like, it does happen. Other than that, he's completely plant-based. Once in a while, cheese sneaks in, like pizza with the hockey team. And he's okay. Like, he can get away with that and not do it very often. It doesn't seem to impact him. But when it's a part of your regular daily food intake, I think that's when the problems creep in. So, I mean, for me, it's just not even a question. I would never have it.
We see that with our son as well. He's allergic to wheat. He's allergic to gluten. And we've done a lot of healing of his belly over the last 8 years. And now he's finally at a point where, or actually more than 8 years, but over the last 2 years, he's at a point where, you know, he can have, his pizza won't have cheese on it, but he can have a regular dough pizza, or he could have a cupcake or a piece of cake, vegan piece of cake that is not gluten-free, and he'll be able to deal with that fine, because there's been so much healing over time. But when they're constantly eating the foods that they're allergic to, when they're constantly eating the dairy, it's not helping your gut microbiome. It's not helping the lining of your stomach. It's not helping your cells be the best cells that they can. So the body just can't tolerate it. I mean, I'm sure you get this as often as we do when people say, well, I really don't eat that much dairy anymore anyway. I just have, you know, a couple of pieces of cheese a couple of times a week. So, you know, in their minds, they're doing really well because they've eliminated so much. They're using almond milk. They're not eating yogurt anymore. But those pieces of cheese, because they haven't had that time to heal, it's quite detrimental. Do you find the same thing?
Absolutely. And, you know, so there's so many parts to that. Like, obviously, we're after progress, not perfection. So way to go for the almond milk. And there are so many alternatives nowadays. I mean, it's just so not even necessary. You can get so many awesome plant-based cheeses that will help you over the hump. So people just need to understand it's not just about breathing. It's about, you know, IGF-1 levels and cancer and all of the other things that go along with dairy that we really don't want to put in our body, right? So, yeah.
Is dairy the first thing that you normally recommend that people take out if they're not willing to make that overnight change?
Yes, 100%.
Ahead of gluten?
Ahead of gluten, yeah. I mean, not everybody is allergic to gluten. And, you know, I still eat gluten. So I think dairy's the number one thing. If you can get dairy out of your life, I think that's really important. I mean, the saturated fat, the cholesterol, bovine leukemia virus, you know, the Johne's disease, paratuberculosum, what is it? The paratuberculosum virus that causes, or bacteria that causes Crohn's in cows, that's in there. I mean, there's just so many things that we should be avoiding in dairy products. And so, yeah, I think it's got to be first.
I think people don't also recognize that the cows are producing the milk with specific hormones for their baby cows to grow and to be healthy, the same way we produce our breast milk for our babies to grow and be healthy. And there is not this recognition that there are hormones in those in those products that we are then consuming and are becoming part of our body and changing the way that our body is working. And, you know, even just this morning on our social media at Plant Trainers, there was a question about, well, what about the estrogen in soy? Aren't you worried about that? So, you know, I did get into it. It's the phytoestrogen. It's not the same estrogen. It's not absorbed by the body. It doesn't block anything in the body. But we do have those problems when it comes to dairy products. It's just not talked about, and it needs to be talked about more.
Right on. Yeah.
Coming back to the asthma, was there a specific kind that you had or your son had? We're not talking about exercise-induced asthma necessarily. Is there a difference? Is asthma just asthma?
You know, I guess it's different for everybody. And I was told that, you know, mine was stemmed from allergies, but I had everything-induced asthma. So I had laughter-induced asthma, exercise-induced asthma, animal-induced asthma. Like, it was just anything and everything, you know, was the cause of my asthma. For my son, it seemed to be more of an exercise-induced thing. And so that meant that he could sort of go along with his day and not get winded and, you know. But as soon as he was involved in a sport, we really saw a difference. We really noticed what was going on. And I have a theory about that. I think that when people are sensitive in this way, they probably have a low-grade inflammation happening all the time that just rears its head when, you know, under exertion. So, I mean, are there different kinds of asthma? Yeah, probably. And I think that it's all caused by the root. The root cause is probably the same across the board. And I think that has to do with inflammation in the body, which is largely due to the foods.
So your son has exercise-induced asthma. You said he's playing hockey now and sometimes is going out for pizza and having cheese, but he knows that there's a direct impact of the cheese on his asthma, and he still chooses to eat the cheese. Can you wrap my mind around that thought process, and have you had that conversation with him before?
You're talking to the black and the gray person gets it. The black and white person doesn't.
No, let me begin by saying he's 17 and strong-willed. The other thing is that he is 100% vegetarian, 100%. He would never have meat or an egg, or he would never, you know, just buy cheese and have it in the house. Like, that would never happen. We're talking about the odd occasion during the winter months when he goes out with his hockey team or his buddies and they have that. And to add to that, so if he knows he's got a practice or a game, if he knows he's going to be in tryouts, he is so vigilant about, you know, I know that what I eat tonight is going to impact my performance tomorrow. And so, for example, he has his first game of the season tonight. He's a junior player now, and he's careful. So, I mean, lunch was noodles and vegetables today. He knows what he's got to do so that he's on his game tonight, and he's really clear about that. Yeah, and there's that other part. Yeah.
I think that if he was at that stage where it still did induce the asthma or still did make him feel sick as opposed to not performing at his very, very best, it sounds like it would be a different answer, right? Like, he wouldn't eat it if he would end up on the puffers the next day.
Yeah, I mean, he hasn't needed a puffer since he was 5 years old. Like, it's really not a thing anymore. It's just the way he was raised now. And so, yeah, I think that, you know, there's a little extra motivation if he can't breathe and you know it's because of the cheese, pretty good chance you're going to.
Right. I deal with high school students all the time. I understand the age group and the thought concept and process. And I love talking about the mindset and understanding how these people are thinking, because there is a direct impact, like you just said, on the food they put in their body and their performance that they're going to have. And to have people change and do something different from what they're so used to doing is not a very easy thing to do. So for everybody that's listening, that's thinking like, you know, I have this issue, maybe the food is the problem, maybe I should stop or change it. they're not always so willing to change it until they have a serious complication or something serious happens to somebody else they know. So how do we encourage people to go through that process of changing the way they think about the food and how that is going to interact with their body?
That's such a powerful and important question, and I don't know. I mean, yeah, it's such a critical piece, right? I mean, people, once they know what to do and they know why they should do it, then the next thing is are they motivated enough to do it? And so what's the underlying drive? What's the underlying motivation? Is it that they don't want to have a heart attack and die? Is it that they want to be a better athlete? I mean, and a lot of people just want to eat the way they eat. And I don't know how to change that. I mean, that's why I typically work with people who really do want to change. And it's a really interesting question, and I don't know the answer.
I don't know that there is an answer.
I think the answer is different for each individual. And, before we hit record, we were talking about working with ideal clients who come to us ready for that change, understanding the power of plant-based, just needing to be able to apply it and get over their challenges and make it work. But when we have all these different personalities, it's even those people who are ready, it's still going to look different for everybody. But going out into the public and even amongst your friends, right, and talking to people, you're going to make a big enough impact on maybe 1 out of 10 people that you speak to in the non-work environment. In the work environment, when you have people who are ready to make a change, ready to change their lives, whether they understand that that's plant-based or not, you're going to be successful with 9 out of 10 of those people. So I think just, getting the message out, hitting it home as many times as possible, putting it on social media, having those conversations, but not putting any emotional attachment to it is going to get people ready so that if they do start to see they need it for performance or they need it for their life or they need to influence somebody else. Like I have a family who all 8 of them went plant-based because one child had a problem, right? And they've lost over 100 pounds collectively to this date. So you never know what's going to get people, but the more exposed people are, the more ready they're going to be when something does come along. And hopefully it's not something tragic.
Right.
And I think the other interesting piece to that is people are motivated by their different, right? So there's the vegan community, and they're motivated by, animal welfare. And then there are the people who, I just had a friend reach out to me and say, we never really thought of going plant-based, but, I didn't realize until now about the environmental impact. I was unaware. And so people are motivated by different things. And I think the beauty is that it's so easy to do it now.
Yeah, and environmental. I could remember shortening my showers to save the water and to save the environment. And now that I understand how much water goes into making 1/4 pounder versus how much water I'm using in a shower, I shower as long as I want now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I don't have to cut back in those ways because I know that, not that I abuse it, but, I realize my contribution to the environment. And I think, with recycling becoming what it is now compared to what it was when we were kids, which was basically non-existent, everything's kind of coming along. But those health factors of making people feel better, not having to put steroids into their body, not having an asthma attack. Why don't we take a little bit of a step backwards and just for people, I'm pretty sure that everybody knows what asthma is or what it feels like or sounds like, but just in case people don't have that experience, let's just go back and give them a little bit of a rundown of what's happening there.
So as far as what it's like to have an asthma attack or
or how to recognize that you do have asthma or that you do need to do something about it, whether it's change your diet or seek help or what have you.
Yeah, so asthma is really on the rise. In fact, when I speak to classes or schools, I always ask elementary schools, about asthma rates, and it's amazing how many kids put up their hand nowadays compared to when I was the only kid with asthma years ago. And it can be masked in a lot of ways. Sometimes people just have a chronic cough and they don't know why, or people have trouble exhaling instead of inhaling, or there's a problem at night, or there's wheezing and you think it's hay fever or the season. There can be a lot of things, and even things like exercise-induced asthma. People can think that it's something else, that they're out of breath, or it's something to do with their heart. It's a good idea to find out if you think you might have asthma, obviously, and it's a good idea to get a real diagnosis. And along with that diagnosis, you'll be prescribed drugs. You just will. There's nothing wrong with having something just in case, right? But the truth is that in all of the years, I'm talking my entire life of seeing doctors and respirologists and respiratory therapists, not a single person ever asked me what I was eating. And so I think what's really critical is that people start to understand that all facets of our physiology are affected by what we eat. Nobody has ever put together in the medical community, at least Western medicine that I ever spoke to, nobody ever put together, the fact that my lung health was impacted by the foods that I was eating. And so I think that's really important. If people don't even have a diagnosis, change your diet and see what happens.
And yeah, I think you're right in terms of those medications can be important, especially when it's life or death, right? If you can't breathe, you can't get oxygen to your body, your heart won't pump, your brain won't get oxygen. So it might be vital to take those medications at first, as detrimental to the body as they may be in the long run, but they keep you alive. But when you do change your diet, and like you said, you and your son not needing those puffers anymore, if you're as in tune with your body as you should be, you'll know when you need them and when you don't. You mentioned hay fever and allergies, and a lot of asthma is induced by hay fever and allergies. So I'm wondering, probably already guessing the answer, did you have hay fever and seasonal allergies earlier on in your life?
Yes, and that's the beautiful thing of all this. So, I was allergic to the pollen, and I was allergic to, and, when people come talk to me, like my friends and people I know talk to me about, they're struggling with hay fever, or, there's pollen in the air, and so they're taking stuff, they're on puffers. The truth is if you don't have inflammation in your body, you don't react to any of that. So I was allergic to all of those things, and cats, and mites, and dust, and my horses, and rabbits, and, the whole list goes on and on. So when I changed my diet, my allergies disappeared. So I'm not allergic to animals anymore. I'm not allergic to pollen anymore. I can still go out for a run, and, the pollen's flying around. It just doesn't affect me. It's just profound.
About 10 years ago, we were saying that we should have bought shares in the Claritin company because we would go through so many tablets every season, and now it's totally a non-issue.
So do you find that those results are typical? Like the people you work with that have all these allergies, do you find that once they embrace more of a plant-based lifestyle, all their allergies just disappear and they become totally clear? Is that normal?
So, my clients don't always come to me because they have asthma and allergies, right? So that's the first thing. But often people who are struggling with other things have allergies and asthma. So it'll be on their list of things that are wrong, which usually includes things like weight issues, high cholesterol, maybe, blood sugar issues, etc., autoimmune disorders. And yes, the allergies, when people make a shift, the allergies always become less of an issue. I don't have any science or any documentation in my own experience to say whether or not these allergies are gone completely, but it's been my experience that when people shift and their internal, state, their health improves internally, that their reaction to the environment is profoundly changed.
I agree. I had hay fever all my life. I had exercise-induced asthma. I played sports all the time. And as I continue to eat plant-based over the last 8 years, I find that it has been getting better and better. I still have some allergies. The cat,
but it's like right up in there in his face every day.
But the cat lives in the house, and if I'm not hanging around the cat, I don't really feel it, where I used to feel it a lot more. It's really if I just snuggle up kind of thing that I start to get itchy-eyed and stuff. But the asthma has been gone for a long time, and the hay fever, I just don't feel it.
I think if we said hay fever to our children, they wouldn't know what that meant. They wouldn't know what it is. Yeah, they've not been exposed to that kind of vocabulary even. Yeah.
That's awesome. So Adam, did you used to go for your runs with your Ventolin?
I had it with me at gym class. I had it with me when I played hockey on the bench, and sometimes I would take a puff like between shifts kind of thing once in a while. But it's been years since that's really changed a lot. Yeah. So I don't use it at all. I don't even have one anymore.
Yeah, and I had asthma diagnosed in grade 9. I got the whooping cough, and so asthma kind of stuck with me there. And I would get, actually, now that we're talking, I would actually get bouts of whoops throughout the cold season. So I would cough because I had a cold, but I would get stuck in that whooping, not to the degree where I ever need to go get medication for it again. I was just this is just part of my life. I had it once and it will always come back. And now that I think about it, I cannot remember the last time I've whooped in the last 6 or 7 years for sure. Yeah, since becoming plant-based. So it's so interesting how, you said it's on people's lists, but it's not their main purpose. And then we heal in such amazing ways and sometimes don't even notice it until it's poof right there in your face again to pick up on, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Super interesting. And, that just reminded me, I used to get pneumonia every winter. Every winter I had pneumonia, did antibiotics, the whole thing. And I haven't had pneumonia in years and years. And, yeah, I just remember all of my runs, carrying my Ventolin with me, and it was always a thing. It just always was with me, just in case. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely, if you have it, you definitely need it, right? Yeah. That's for sure. And we do talk about pharmaceuticals a lot on this show and how we don't always support it. But when it's a life and death situation, or when you're not making any lifestyle changes, it needs to be there sometimes, for sure.
So how did you know that after just a few days you no longer needed your Ventolins and you could put them on the shelf and stop using the medication that was prescribed to you?
So I used my Ventolin as I needed it. So it wasn't like I woke up in the morning and did 2 puffs 4 times a day or anything. I think that's what it actually said on the bottle or on the little canister. I used it when I needed it. And to be clear, I didn't throw them away, for a long time. I thought, they should be there and we should keep them just in case. And I think what happened was I just sort of didn't need it. I just didn't need it.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that the people listening are not going to say, oh, so I could start eating broccoli and I could stop taking my inhaler. It's not that straightforward and not that simple, and every's going to be different.
Put a broccoli in your fanny pack instead of your puffer. Yeah. It's about the same shape.
Yeah, no, I think it's really important that people, I mean, what do I say? Make sure you do this under doctor's supervision or whatever, but listen to your body. And it doesn't mean that you should just throw it out or get rid of it. I mean, if you need it, you need it. I mean, it did save my life on many, many occasions. And so, yeah, I mean, that's really important. The other thing that I think is important is that there were other things that I started to notice once I cleared my body out and I was eating plant-based. I noticed other things that could actually trigger, not like a full-blown asthma attack, but I just noticed oh, okay, I know that there must be something in that processed food, for example. So things like, sulfites, artificial color, artificial flavor, MSG, and things like that, I noticed could be a trigger as well. So it's got to be a pretty clean diet.
I think as we become more plant-based and whole food plant-based, especially less processed foods, we start to notice those small changes in our bodies, and how there are certain restaurants that you could eat in and feel fine in the morning, and other restaurants you wake up and your face is twice the size. Yeah. Or even, we go out for dinner or to friend's house for dinner, and I'm constantly being offered wine, and I just say, I don't drink wine, and we're not big drinkers anyway. Adam's not a drinker at all. I'm not a big drinker, but I guess it's the sulfites are in wine, or maybe even the coloring or what have you. It just makes me feel sick. Yeah. Right? It makes me feel sick. And it's actually something I was able to tolerate before when I was less healthy, I guess because it was being masked by just not feeling well in general and all these other things. But now I just know my body, and it just doesn't make me feel well, and it's usually a no thank you. And even if they say, but it's vegan wine, I made sure that it was vegan wine. I'm like, that's great, thank you, but no.
Yeah, definitely. I know organic wines tend to have less sulfites, and so if people are looking for fewer sulfites, that's a way to go.
I think it becomes a process of becoming more aware of the food that you're consuming, what you're putting into your body, but also noticing how it makes you feel. And a lot of people are not very mindful of their food intake or the process of eating. They sit down at the table and they shovel it all into their mouth, or they're watching TV mindlessly feeding their face. And when you take a moment to actually eat slowly and process mentally what you're doing by putting what into your body, and later on even noticing how your body's reacting, it makes a big difference to your quality of life and your ability to understand how certain foods affect you in different ways.
Yes, absolutely. And I would say that I was that person. I didn't really realize how sick I was. And when that cloud lifted, it was like a miracle. It was like, what? I can think clearly. That gray cloud isn't hovering over me. My body feels lighter. And then it was only then that I started to tune in, when it was such a big change. I mean, but for years and years, I was just kind of dragging myself and didn't even really know it, And I was fit, I was athletic, but I didn't pay attention to what was really going on inside. So you're right, I agree with that.
So you said that cheese was one of the things that you held on the longest before you made that change for your son, and I'm sure that you see that with a lot of your clients as well. And we love to end with some actionable tips towards the end of the podcast. So what kind of actionable tips do you have for people who are really I just love my cheese too much to go all in?
So back when I gave up cheese, I really thought that it was the salt. I thought that that's what I was missing, and I didn't know what I know now. But what I did was I ate pickles. So pickles were my big go-to for several weeks whenever I had cheese cravings. And then the cheese cravings just went away. But, nowadays there are other things that you can do. Like there's that whole, and I'm sure you guys know and do this, walnuts ground up with nutritional yeast. And then, of course, there's all sorts of tofu fetas and almond cheeses and other nut cheeses, and then processed cheeses that you can buy that are vegan. I call these treat and transition foods. They're definitely not something you should be consuming every day, because they are not exactly whole food plant-based or healthy, health promoting, but they can help get you away from the casomorphines and away from the addictive quality of cheese. So I call them treat and transition foods. And of course, Miyoko's Kitchen is one of my favorite. You guys probably have some go-tos as well.
Yes, for sure. And I think living in Ontario, which you do as well, which was interesting when we first met up. But yeah, in Ontario we have a plethora of different kinds of cheeses, and it's funny because even in our own home, there's people who prefer one company over another. So there really is something for every taste. So for those people who have tasted, non-dairy cheeses, let's say 3 years ago, and said, oh, it was disgusting. First of all, it probably was. and the companies have changed the recipes since.
Yeah.
So go ahead and try that again. But there's so many different types and so many beautiful artisan cheeses. So if you are going to a party where there's a cheese board or charcuterie board, you can bring your own, and it looks just about the same and it tastes beautiful. So you have all of those options. There's melty ones, there's Parmesan-y ones. So any kind of recipe that you're used to making that you'd like to keep the same, you can definitely find or make a replacement that is quite suitable.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So Margot, it's really great connecting with people that are doing similar things and helping people get healthier on their journey to good health and longevity. So I want to just thank you so much for being here with us on the Plant Trainers podcast. If people want to reach out to you and get more information on how they can get some help with their asthma, their allergies, or whatever else you could help them with, where would you like them to go to reach out?
Well, you can email me directly at Margot, M-A-R-G-O-T, at taigawholehealth.com. And my website is taigawholehealth.com. Taiga is Taiga. And it's just another name for the boreal forest where I live up here in northwestern Ontario. So
that's beautiful. And we will link to that in the show notes as well. So again, thank you so much for spending time with us today. We really do hope that you have the best day, the best week, the best month, and enjoy the beautiful colored leaves.
Thank you so much for having me.